And please, everyone, give a warm welcome to our brother, Jonathan Viaud.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you here today. Thank you so much for having me. You know, I joked with Michael. I was looking at the pictures from last year, and your keynote speaker then was Michael Farris. I don't know what you did over the last year to have to be stuck with me today, but we'll have to have a conversation about that. It truly is an honor to be here with you today, and I don't need to reintroduce myself. I appreciate Michael sharing all of that, but yes, I was actually born and raised here in the Garden State, and in October of 2020, my family and I moved to Florida, so I went from being a Jersey guy to a Florida man. Thanks for not holding that against me and welcoming me back home. But I gotta be honest with you, I was a bit nervous about coming back here today because I did not want all of you to think, oh sure, the guy who fled to the free state of Florida is coming back here to lecture us about our problems here in New Jersey. So if I may, let me address that right from the start by assuring you that whether it's Florida or New Jersey, Texas or California, Iowa or Illinois, liberty and freedom must always, always be defended by an engaged, self-governing citizenry. While the obstacles and challenges we face may differ in degree, the enemy of freedom is on the prowl in every state of this nation. I come not to lecture, but to encourage, to lock arms with you, and to assure you that the National COS organization remains in this fight for liberty with each and every one of you. Nearly 7 years ago to the day, some of you joined me for our very first COS Trenton Day on May 16th, 2019. We gathered in room 209 of the State House, heard from some of our great sponsors like Assemblyman Robert Auth, who was just here a few minutes ago, Senator Joseph Panaccio, and then we headed to meet with as many legislators as we could. I think I saw Tara Fleming here, and I think Tara was like a bulldog in the hallway between the annex and the State House, grabbing legislators and everything. We had a really good day, and we were a small group at the time, but it was successful, and we left here feeling very encouraged. While that was not too long ago, how dramatically our political landscape and discourse has changed. Less than a year later, the world lost its collective mind over the COVID-19 virus. Then came the chaos of the 2020 presidential election, then January 6, 2021, followed by vaccine mandates, Bidenflation, and invasion at our southern border. Then 2 short years ago, President Trump was nearly assassinated in Butler, Pennsylvania. And on September 10th of last year, Charlie Kirk was assassinated on a college campus in Utah. Just a few weeks ago, there was yet another assassination on President Trump, marking, I lost count, is it the 3rd or 4th time in just 2 years? How has our nation reacted to this political violence? How have we reacted to the abuse and violation of the trust from our institutions? Sadly, as a nation, we have responded with a collective shoulder shrug. So what hope do we have as a nation if we remain so divided? If there were ever a year for us to come together as Americans to celebrate the blessings of this nation's history of freedom, liberty, and opportunity, surely it would be 2026, the 250th birthday of the United States. But how can we truly celebrate and appreciate all that was done by our founders if we neglect to learn the history? This may not be breaking news to this crowd, but the final day of 1776 was not July 4th. That means in addition to honoring America's birth date, we must also remember that our independence was nearly defeated before the year 1776 concluded. When was the Declaration of Independence signed? Yeah, I knew this crowd would be educated. That's right, well done. So it wasn't actually signed on July 4th. There were a few signatures on July 4th, but most of the signers of the Declaration signed it on August 2nd, 1776. At that time, the army that was under the direct leadership of General George Washington, stationed in New York, numbered approximately 20,000 men. Also, at that same time, hundreds of British ships came to New York shores with a total of 32,000 well-trained and battle-hardened troops, an amount greater than the population of the largest American city, poised to crush the rebellion. 20 days after that somewhat signing ceremony, if you will, of the Declaration, General William Howe led the British attack on the American troops in New York. What followed for the Americans over the next few months was devastating defeat after devastating defeat. Washington's army retreated from New York, made its way south through New Jersey, desperately hoping to rally a defense to protect what Washington believed was the enemy's ultimate target, the cradle of our independence, Philadelphia. New Jersey, by the way, was home to the largest Loyalist population in the United States, which meant the British were well informed and warmly received as they raced to capture Washington and defeat the Americans. As the losses mounted, Washington's army dwindled. The army of 20,000 in August numbered 3,000 by mid-November. After arriving in Brunswick, New Jersey, reinforcements brought that number to approximately 4,000, but that was short-lived. On December 1st, 1776, 2,000 soldiers, half of what comprised Washington's army at that point, watched their enlistments expire. Instead of re-enlisting, these men simply left for home. Can you imagine that? Just a short 5 months after the Continental Congress declared America's independence from Great Britain, 2,000 American soldiers chose to go home rather than continue to fight for liberty. American General Nathanael Greene wrote that these men walked away as the enemy was within a 2-hour march of their position. 7 days later, Washington led what was left of his army on another retreat, crossing the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. It would be an understatement to say that our struggle for independence was on the cusp of becoming a footnote in world history. To make matters worse, on January 1st, 1777, just a few short weeks away, the remaining soldiers' enlistments were set to expire. Washington was faced with a crisis. Some might call it an American crisis. In fact, that's exactly what Thomas Paine would title his pamphlet, which he published on December 19th, 1776. Many of you who I spoke with this morning know about this speech and asked me to mention it, and it just so happened that I had a couple of words here. What do you know? I'm sure many of you recall the opening words to his pamphlet. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Many believe that Washington was so inspired by Paine's words that he ordered the pamphlet to be read to the American troops stationed in Pennsylvania. While we don't know if that is actually what happened next is without debate. Desperate for a victory, to shift momentum and galvanize his army before the expiring enlistments, Washington planned a surprise attack on Hessian troops stationed here in Trenton, New Jersey. On Christmas night, December 25th, 1776, Washington's army was to cross the icy waters of the Delaware River in darkness, then arrive before dawn on December 26th to attack the unsuspecting Hessians. At least, that was the plan. However, as the crossing began, a devastating storm struck the area, bringing rain, sleet, snow, and violent hail. The army's struggle to cross the river caused a 3-hour delay in landing. Washington was again at a crossroads. Carry on the attack, which would now certainly happen after dawn, or turn back, cross the Delaware, and regroup. Determined to strike the enemy and win a critical victory, Washington ordered the army to march to Trenton. When informed that the men had reported their gunpowder too wet to fire, Washington commanded the men to fix bayonets. And so, the American patriots marched, many shoeless or with thin, worn clothing, through darkness and bitter cold. Indeed, 2 men froze to death that night. And as I was on my way here this morning, the way my GPS took me to Trenton, I had the opportunity to drive right past the Delaware River, and how much I appreciated that opportunity to take my mind back to 1776 and think about the men as they marched, as they crossed that river. What incredible courage it took to do that. And I was also thinking, as I was walking over here, I parked over on West Lafayette Street, and it was raining, which seemed apropos. But man, my feet were pretty warm in my boots, and I didn't feel all that discouraged about coming here. And yet, all that they had went through, walking without those shoes through the bitter cold, they kept marching. Finally, they arrived outside of Trenton at 8 o'clock, an hour after daylight. And there goes my speech. Let me try and remember this from heart here. They marched and came here to Trenton. Thank you for rescuing me. I'll watch it a little bit more carefully. So where was I? Ah, yes. Finally, they arrived outside of Trenton at 8 o'clock, an hour after daylight. A few moments later, the approximately 2,400 American soldiers that made the crossing attacked the 1,500 Hessian soldiers occupying Trenton. The Americans sprinted toward the town through driving snow and fought ferociously for 45 minutes, ultimately victorious. 21 Hessians were killed, 50 wounded, 900 captured, and about 500 managed to escape. And what of the sleep-deprived, exhausted American patriots? What of them? A total of 4 men were wounded during the battle. None were killed. The only American fatalities that night were the 2 men who had frozen to death on the march. I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like divine protection of divine providence to me. Against all odds, under dire circumstances, Washington and the Continental Army had won a miraculous victory. A week later, when enlistments expired, every single soldier under Washington's command re-enlisted. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Ladies and gentlemen, what those brave American patriots did 250 years ago here on this hallowed ground turned the tide of the war for independence and changed the history of the world forever. 85 years later, when addressing the New Jersey Senate when traveling to his inauguration, President-elect Abraham Lincoln said, "I remember all the accounts there given of the battlefields and struggles for liberties of the country, and none fixed themselves upon my imagination so deeply as the struggle here at Trenton, New Jersey. I can recollect thinking then, boy even though I was, that there must have been something more than common that those men struggled for, that something even more than national independence, that something that held out a great promise to all the people of the world to all time to come." So what was that something to which Lincoln referred? Well, it can be found etched in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yes, for Lincoln, it was the Battle of Trenton that embodied the spirit of 1776 that would serve as the foundation upon which this nation was built. But to whom do we owe the thanks for this victory? Is it Washington, the courageous patriots of the Continental Army, his officers? In 1789, the newly elected President George Washington told us in a proclamation given before Thanksgiving. President Washington said that that Thanksgiving Day was to, quote, "be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being, who is the beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence which we experienced in the course and conclusion of the late war." Ladies and gentlemen, this is our legacy, the legacy of New Jersey and the legacy of America. This is the history and cause for celebration in the year of our 250th birthday and every year after. And in this story, we have the roadmap to the solutions of our current struggle. Yes, our nation is deeply divided, but there are still issues upon which most Americans agree. A majority of Americans believe our federal government needs to stop spending recklessly. A majority of Americans believe our federal government has too much power. An overwhelming majority of Americans believe that there should be term limits on members of Congress. Convention of States' resolution speaks to all three of those issues and more. We have the solution big enough to solve the problems caused by our federal government. All of you are here today because you want to preserve our liberty for posterity. By the grace of God and the wisdom of our framers of the Constitution, we do not have to fight a war against our government. We simply have to appeal to heaven, make phone calls, build relationships, educate our fellow citizens, and urge our state legislators to pass a resolution calling for a convention where the states will gather to just have a conversation. That's all we're truly asking of them. And after all, if a ragtag team of American patriots can fight and defeat the most powerful army on the face of the planet, then surely we can call a simple convention. But if that convention is to be called, then we must do our part. And yes, even in New Jersey. We must be willing to travel from district to district to reach, teach, and activate the people of the Garden State. We must develop relationships with legislators and show up to this Capitol in even greater numbers than we have this morning to advocate for our resolution. This will not be easy. It is hard, but it is necessary work. After all, the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Inevitably, as you speak to your fellow citizens about Convention of States, you will be asked questions like, do you really believe this will happen in New Jersey? Do you really believe America can be saved by an Article 5 convention? I encourage you to stand tall, remember the history of 1776, including the miracle of the Battle of Trenton, and respond by paraphrasing the words of President Ronald Reagan and say, why shouldn't we believe that? We are Americans. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. May God bless you all. May God bless the state of New Jersey, and may God always and forever bless the United States of America. Thank you.